There was something that we discussed last time. I was wondering, like, if you think that there's a context behind every image and that's what makes it work.
Well, that's always has to be like a shared context between the photographer and the viewer. Someone asked me about how I approach landscapes, and I realized that whenever I take a landscape, I go there and I look, I see, and I'm trying to capture the feeling at that very moment. I've never imagined like, okay, I need to come back here tomorrow in the morning because it will be more beautiful. Now I'm there, and that's what I'm taking a portrait of. And maybe with portraits, it's the other way around. Maybe I'm like doing a landscape of a person. I don't know, sort of. I've always considered myself a photographer that does database programming for a living, basically. Uh, I knew that I wasn't happy at that previous job. It was like eating me inside because I knew I loved something else and I wanted to do something else, but then I had to spend 8-9 hours a day working just to get paid. So then I started doing wet plate and started to like play with the idea that maybe this could be my way out. So I gathered all my strength and went to tell my boss that, like, listen, I'm sorry, but this can't go on. Like, my heart is somewhere else.
A ještě z té krásy, víš, to se mi nezví. No, když jsem zmrzlej, tak teda ztrácím první zásobu a...
It's the best feeling. Wet plate collodion, or wet plate for short, is a beautiful, slow, and rather demanding process from the 1850s. It was a first photographic technique that ever took on a large scale and revolutionized photography back then by making it relatively cheap to produce and making it much more accessible to people than paintings, the only way of making portraits until then. One of the great things about this technique is that it keeps forever because it doesn't fade away, it doesn't discolor. So even today we can still see how vintage plates taken in the 1850s, 1860s looked like. I can only capture what people bring in the studio. There's no way of manipulating them into something else, and if they didn't bring much, I cannot get a good portrait. So I need their cooperation, I need their like inner light to shine out into the camera. And this is a good example of inner light shining out, I think. This is a self-portrait that I've shot after my chemo treatment that ended 3 years ago now. So there was like almost like a 1 year gap in my photography because of that treatment. And I was like on the brink of not being for a couple times, so I just couldn't find the motivation or strength to do that. So yeah. See you in a bit. All right. I think we're pretty much set. Can you hold like that for like 45 minutes before we shoot it in there? It's not just showing the person's face, but there's also like a story behind the photo, like an unspoken story, feelings, stuff like that. And that's what makes the photo stand out, and I think that it needs to have that something extra for it to make it, I don't want to say art, but something more than just a plain depiction of a person's likeness. That's something I came to realize, that most of the time when I do landscape photography, I need to have a sky, the land, and the sea, and like the line where they meet, and that's something that fascinates me. Okay, so I'm going to get the plate now. When I was leaving my previous job, we had this tag on the door that said development, because I was in software development section. So before leaving, I just took it off the door and I put it here in my darkroom, because I liked the idea how that carried over from one type of development to another. So I keep it here to remind me of what I have now. All right, so should we start? Mm-hmm. Somehow I felt I was at a crossroads in my life, sort of like I was leaving something behind, and I was facing something new. So this was quite fitting for me when I found this spot, because there's two different parts. I don't know which one is the disease and which one is the life that came after it, but there's two different parts for sure. It definitely changed me as a person. I think I calmed down very much, and I started to appreciate things much more, like small things. Maybe I noticed details more than I used to. I don't know. It would only be logical that it somehow translates into my photography as well. I don't think I'm able to point it out exactly, but I would be surprised if it didn't change the way I see things and captures things and moments. Let's leave that to the viewer to decide. 1, 2, 3. I remember my father like putting paper in water and taking it out and having image on the paper. So I thought like he was a magician. He was in red light making images appear out of water.